The night he found her, the bus stop light flickered like it was deciding whether to stay alive or give up, and for a moment, he wondered if the world was doing the same. Rain had soaked the cracked pavement, the kind of rain that crept into your bones and made loneliness feel heavier. She sat there beneath the shelter, unmoving, her wheelchair angled slightly toward the road as if she had been waiting, not just for a bus, but for someone to notice she still existed. He almost walked past her, almost chose exhaustion over compassion, until he saw her hands clenched tight in her lap and the way her eyes followed every passing car with quiet desperation. That was when the single dad stopped, because something in her stillness felt louder than any cry for help. Before the story goes any further, take a moment to pause. If you believe that kindness still matters in a world that often feels cold, if you believe in second chances and unexpected miracles, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps stories like this reach hearts that are still waiting in the dark. He was a single father named Daniel, though no one at work called him that anymore. They called him reliable, quiet, invisible. His days were built around routines that left little room for surprises, waking before dawn, packing lunches, tying shoelaces, working long shifts at a warehouse, and coming home to help with homework under a flickering kitchen light. His wife had died 3 years earlier in a highway accident that never made the news, leaving him with a 7-year-old son and a grief that never fully loosened its grip. He had learned how to function without feeling too much, because feeling too much made it harder to survive. That night, he had just finished a double shift and was thinking about how to stretch the last bit of rice and beans into tomorrow's dinner when he saw her sitting alone. The girl couldn't have been older than 19. Her legs lay motionless beneath a thin blanket that did nothing to fight the cold, and her jacket looked borrowed, too big at the shoulders, as if it had once belonged to someone who could walk away. Her face was pale, not just from the weather but from something deeper, something like abandonment that had settled into her bones. There was no bag beside her, no phone glowing in her hand, no sign that anyone was coming back for her. Daniel noticed the small details because grief had taught him to read silence. He saw the faint tremor in her fingers, the way her jaw tightened when a bus passed without stopping, the quiet resignation that settled over her shoulders each time hope arrived and left again. He didn't ask questions at first. He stood there awkwardly, rain dripping from his jacket, feeling the weight of a decision he hadn't planned to make. His life already felt stretched thin, like a rope pulled too tight. Yet something inside him, the part that remembered holding his wife's hand in a hospital room and wishing someone would tell him it would be okay, refused to let him walk away. When he finally spoke, his voice came out calm, steady, almost gentle, as if he were afraid that raising it might break something fragile in front of him. His next words were simple, unremarkable on the surface, but they would echo through her life long after that night ended. Those words carried no pity, no judgment, no obligation. They carried presence. They told her she was not a burden, not a problem to be solved, not an inconvenience in someone else's schedule. For the first time in hours, maybe days, the tightness in her chest eased just enough for her to breathe. Her name was Lena. She had been waiting for a bus that stopped running after 8, though no one had told her that when she was discharged from the rehabilitation center earlier that afternoon. A clerical error, they called it later. She called it the moment she realized the world could forget. You couldn't stand on your own 2 feet. Lena's paralysis came from an accident that stole more than movement. One moment she had been a college freshman with plans to study architecture, sketching buildings that touched the sky, and the next she was waking up to a ceiling she didn't recognize, her legs silent and distant. Friends visited at first, then less often. Messages slowed, then stopped. Her father lived in another country. Her mother had died when she was young, and the aunt who promised to help discovered how heavy responsibility felt when it rolled in on wheels. That night at the bus stop was not just about being stranded, it was about realizing how quickly people moved on when your life slowed down. Daniel listened as she shared pieces of her story in fragments, never interrupting, never rushing her. He knew what it felt like to have your future erased in a single moment. He knew the humiliation of needing help with things you once did without thinking. As rain continued to fall, he made another decision, one that scared him more than walking past ever could. He helped her get into his old car, the seats worn and smelling faintly of detergent and fast food, and drove through streets that looked different when you were no longer alone. Bringing Lena home was not heroic. It was messy, complicated, and terrifying. Daniel worried about what his son would think, about whether he could afford the extra expense, about how fragile the balance of his life already was. But when his son woke up and saw Lena the next morning, there was no fear, only curiosity and kindness. Children, Daniel realized, often understood what adults overthought. Over the following weeks, Lena stayed longer than anyone planned. Temporary became uncertain. Uncertain became something like family. Life did not suddenly become easy. There were arguments with insurance companies, nights when Daniel fell asleep at the kitchen table surrounded by unpaid bills, mornings when Lena stared out the window wondering if this was all her life would ever be. She struggled with shame, with anger, with the deep ache of watching other people move freely while she counted each small victory. Daniel struggled too. He doubted himself constantly, questioning whether he was doing the right thing or simply delaying an inevitable goodbye. Yet in the quiet moments, something remarkable began to grow. Daniel noticed how Lena's eyes lit up when she sketched buildings from memory, how her hands moved with confidence even when her legs could not. He noticed how his son sat beside her, asking questions about bridges and towers, dreaming aloud about places they might visit someday. Without realizing it, Daniel began to speak words to Lena that no doctor ever had. He spoke about worth not being measured by speed or strength. He spoke about how some lives change the world quietly, without headlines or applause. He spoke about staying. Those words became an anchor. Lena began physical therapy again, not because she believed she would walk, but because she believed her life still had direction. She applied for online classes, her sketches evolving into designs that reimagined spaces for people like her. Spaces where no one had to feel stranded or forgotten. Daniel watched her transform not into someone healed, but into someone whole. And in helping her, he felt parts of himself heal too. The house filled with a kind of warmth he thought had died with his wife. Not joy exactly, but purpose. Months passed, and the world tested them again. A letter arrived informing Daniel that Lena's temporary stay could no longer be extended. Rules were rules, they said. Daniel spent a sleepless night staring at the ceiling, feeling the familiar helplessness crawl back into his chest. In the morning, he made calls he was afraid to make, asked for help he had never asked for before, and told Lena something that would define both of their futures. He told her she wasn't alone, not now, not ever, and that some promises didn't need paperwork to be real. The community responded in ways Daniel never expected. Neighbors he barely knew donated ramps and equipment. An old coworker connected Lena with a nonprofit that funded accessible housing designs. Daniel's story spread quietly, not as a viral sensation, but as a reminder of what people could be when someone went first. Lena eventually moved into an apartment designed from her own sketches, a space that reflected resilience instead of loss. Daniel helped her move, pretending not to notice the lump in his throat. Years later, on a bright afternoon filled with sunlight instead of rain, Daniel watched Lena present her first completed project, a community center designed for people with mobility challenges, built on the belief that no one should be left waiting alone. She rolled across the stage with confidence, her voice steady, her eyes searching the crowd until they found Daniel and his son. In that moment, he understood the true weight of the words he had spoken years ago at a bus stop. They had not saved her. They had reminded her she was worth saving. If this story has touched your heart, if it made you feel something deep and quiet that you can't quite put into words, please take a moment now to like the video, share it, and subscribe to the channel. Your engagement helps keep stories of compassion and humanity alive. And before this story ends, I have a special request. Please comment below with a single word that represents what this story made you feel. Hope, kindness, courage, love, or anything that comes from your heart. Daniel never thought of himself as a hero. He was just a tired father who stopped walking long enough to see someone else's pain. But sometimes, a life is changed forever not by grand gestures, but by a calm voice in the rain, by words that say you matter, and by the decision to stay when it would be easier to leave. And somewhere out there tonight, under a flickering light, someone else is waiting, hoping that the next person who passes by will stop,